Oh, sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Looks like another disconnect. So the other question I was reading, one second. Okay, so the sister was saying that she's been having a lot of difficulty with her husband, um, and she has applied for khula because she wasn't seeing any interest in trying to improve the marriage with her husband. And now she's saying that her husband is willing to work on the marriage. Should she go ahead with the khula or not? Well, sometimes, sister, it takes a very, you know, sometimes it takes desperation for a person to finally snap out of their bad habits and say, wow, I need to stop and really look at my situation and do something about it. I've seen this happen before, where a sister is having a difficult time with her husband and he's not open to working on himself, and then all of a sudden when she says, look, if you're not going to invest in this marriage and try to improve, I want a divorce, then the husband says, okay, I'll work on it. Now, sometimes the husband is not sincere. Sometimes the husband just says that to buy more time and to keep you around. And one of the biggest, I think, oppressions that I've observed in my work is that some sisters really have false hope, or they believe in something very unrealistic, and they stick around with a person who is not showing any signs of sincere effort to improve the marriage. So in your situation, sister, I think you should continue with the application of khula, because you have no guarantee that your husband's actually going to do anything to improve the marriage. And unless he shows very significant signs or commits to, let's say, couples counseling or some other process where there is a mediator or some kind of a professional helper, you never know if he's going to live up to his word, especially if you've had many years of negative experience and frame of reference to suggest that your husband may not take this all very seriously, right? Because if somebody really loves somebody, or they care about the person, and they're also worried about their account with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're not going to continue to live in a way that harms or oppresses a person, especially a family member or a wife. So I think you should continue with the khula unless there are some major significant signs that he shows. And if he doesn't, then perhaps you should move ahead with the khula. And if all of a sudden he says, look, I'm ready to commit and here's the steps I'm going to take, then it's something you could consider not doing. You have to make sure that the husband takes his own initiative to improve the marriage. Most of the time, men say, or some men, not all men, there are a lot of good men out there, by the way. Some men will say that, okay, I want to work on the marriage, but then they do nothing, right? They don't take any actual steps to invest in the marriage. So if he's serious, you have to let him show you that he's willing to nourish the marriage and work on it. Until he does that, you should move ahead with your khula process. All right, let's see. There's one other question I see that I have not answered. Just give me a moment. Okay, one question says, Assalamu alaikum. I'm married with someone from a different culture. Alhamdulillah, we are both Muslims. Our marriage is in the rocks, and he left to go to his home country, leaving me alone with my 3-year-old. He cares more about his family than me and his daughter. I'm so tired of crying and praying. I don't know what to do anymore. I guess that was the end of the question. Well, I mean, there's a lot of facts here that I probably would need to be aware of, but I mean, if your husband has been, how long has he been gone? Are we talking about a month or a week or a year, Um, if a man leaves you and abandons you and doesn't come home, or he's no longer providing for you, that is grounds for divorce Islamically. You don't have to stay married to a person like that, because I think a lot of people are under the impression that women need to get their husband's permission to get divorced. But according to my understanding, that is actually not the case. So some sisters believe that they can't divorce a man on their own accord. Yes, you can, especially if you live in Canada or the United States or Australia. You can go and file for divorce, because once you're legally married or legally divorced, you're not Islamically married either, right? So abandonment is a cause for divorce. So the question is how long has he been gone? Is he willing to come back? And why has he left you to go to his family? I don't know any of these details. So unless he does come home and address some of these concerns, you do have the right for grounds for divorce. At the same time, I also understand it's not easy to get divorced, especially if you've been a full-time mom, you don't have provision for yourself. But if you do have a degree and you do have some kind of professional training, it might be a good idea to start investing or looking into work opportunities or part-time work opportunities, so that you can, in the event that you may get divorced, you have some stability for yourself, and that way you no longer feel like you have to be with a person who is oppressing you, and you have that autonomy to be able to survive on your own. This is very important to consider. So I wish I had more details, sister, but other than that, I don't really know what else to provide as far as counsel, because I don't have more information. Okay, any other questions? We have a few minutes left. Just see if there's... Okay, another question here. Last one I'll address for today. What does the Quran say about divorce? Well, it says a lot of things. I mean, there is a surah called Surah Al-Talaq, the chapter on divorce, and it does give some guidance or tips there. So I'm not really sure what you want to know. But what I can say, generally speaking, is that divorce is not something that's haram, and there's also some people have quoted a hadith that says, when you get divorced, the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shakes. And so a lot of people associate this hadith with it being like, strongly disliked or discouraged. But from my understanding, and again, I'm not a scholar of hadith or anything like that, but I do consult with scholars. And from what I've learned, this hadith is actually not strong. It's a weak hadith, and so it should not be something that helps establish our theology in any way, shape, or form. Divorce is allowed in Islam, okay? Think about it like this, ladies and gentlemen. Marriage is simply a contract, right? Nikah in Arabic simply means sexual contract. That's what it means, right? So a marriage in Islam means that I am committed to this person, and we have rights upon each other's bodies as well as responsibility. That's what marriage is in Islam, okay? It's when two people decide to have intimate relations, but it's established, and there is witness and a community. There's a community witness to your marriage, and this is the point of this, is to protect the man and the woman from sleeping around, as well as making sure that they fulfill the trust of husband and wife and fulfill the rights and roles of husband and wife. If your marriage does not work out, you sever the contract and you move on. Okay, it's like, I mean, not to make it sound, well, look, it's basically a business contract, like any other business contract, right? Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't romance and emotionality and all these things in a marriage. No, of course there is, and there should be, and the Prophet ﷺ demonstrated this for us. But we know, for example, Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhu, he was one of the best Sahaba and best people to live. No one's going to doubt that. He was married 6 times in his life. So what does this tell us? It tells us, number one, he had more than one wife, and number two, he probably married and divorced a few times, right? So marriage is a contract, it's a serious contract, and you are responsible for fulfilling it. But the Quran also teaches us, marry with ihsan, marry with excellence and beauty, and if you choose to divorce, divorce with ihsan, divorce with excellence and beauty. So it is our job as believers to do things in the most beautiful and excellent way. We shouldn't do things out of spite, out of revenge, out of resentment. I want to make this person suffer as much as possible because of, they're divorcing me. This is all evil. So, and simply put, the divorce is allowed in Islam, and there are many reasons why a person can get divorced, as well as, there are reasons, like some people believe you can only get divorced if there are major problems, like, substance abuse or cheating or this and that. Certainly those are grounds for a person to get divorced if they so choose. But there are also people that are going through those things and they choose not to divorce. So there's no rule that says you have to divorce somebody for specific reasons. It's up to each couple, right? Unless, of course, your husband or, in the situation where a woman is married to a man and a man becomes a mushrik or a kafir, then that's the only case I can think of where it would be Islamically obliged on you to divorce this man in that case. But, people can also divorce just because, they just don't get along anymore, right? There's no abuse, there's no substance abuse, no cheating, nothing like that. It's just like, we thought this would work, it didn't work, and now we're going to get a divorce. So my advice is always to tell people not to have children for at least 2 to 3 years, because most of us don't date before marriage, and so we have very little information or experience around what it means to be in a serious relationship, and you won't really know any of that until you really live with somebody. So it's always a good idea not to have children right away, just so you can build that foundation for your relationship, learn to adjust and understand what this really takes and what it's all about, and whether or not it has long-term sustainability. So the Quran, as well as you can find great articles on websites like About Islam, Seekers Hub, many resources, mashallah, where you can learn more about the subject. But men and women are both allowed to divorce and have criterion for taking those steps. And I think that we should not take marriage lightly, but we also should not think that divorce is something you can't do. I knew of a case once where a sister got legally divorced, but her husband told her, I didn't Islamically divorce you, and so she stayed living with him for 7 years after they were legally divorced. I mean, because she believed that she can't leave her husband until he says, I divorce you. And he was just being stubborn and ignorant and trying to, use power to control her. But I was, telling the sister, like, you are technically divorced. You're living with this man who's not your husband, just because he told you I'm your husband still. I mean, so we have to also do our research and go to the right scholars or the right resources and go and learn for ourselves. Guys, you can't allow your Islamic spirituality and knowledge to be always based on what someone else tells you. Go and do your own research. Learn what you have to learn. If you don't know Arabic, start learning some vocabulary so you can understand the Quran better. If you don't understand basic fiqh or usul ad-din, the essentials of the religion, take an online course. Learn these things. You have to empower yourselves. Allah commands us in the Quran, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. You must go seek knowledge that there is only one God, right? There is no God other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that also means that when we understand who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, we also understand reality itself. And part of understanding reality is understanding the code of reality, which we find in empirical sciences as well as in revealed religion. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us and give us wisdom. And if I made any mistakes today, it's from myself. And if there was any benefit, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thank you so much for tuning in to About Islam's live Q&A. And I look forward to seeing you all next month. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.